Bringing people and communities together on seclosounds.org.
Your listening station.
This week is the second part about how to use the internet to book flights, or what to look for when you use a travel agent to book flights. And I hope you're sitting down for this, but in the travel news I do not have a story about Ryanair. I know, I can't believe it myself, but that's all coming up on, well, apart from Ryanair, it's all coming up on the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. Hello and welcome to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. Later in the show there'll be travel news, and there'll be a story about EasyJet, which is quite interesting. Social media, which is basically what I've been mentioning over the last few years anyway. Checking airport workers in America, and also what the Jamaican tourist board is going to be doing about people being harassed by spivs, I guess you could use for a better phrase. But that's coming up later. But first, it's about booking flights, whether you use the internet or whether you use a travel agent, the things you should look for. Last week I introduced this topic by going through the various terms and conditions you need to be aware of, what sort of classes you need to be checking out for, and also there was how to get the most out of using your air miles or your frequent flyer points to get a discount, and what you can do if you can't get the flight you want. I'm going to continue on the topic this week. We're carrying a little bit more, which is going to include some websites which will be posted at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. But the first thing I want to do is talk about reviews. I mean, I'm sure you're all very aware. I'm sure you're all well aware of TripAdvisor and what TripAdvisor can do for people looking for accommodation. But you can also do the same sort of thing for airlines as well. There's perhaps something you don't actually do automatically, you just go straight to TripAdvisor, but how you get from A to B is also very important, and it may help you decide whether to pay a little bit more for a more expensive airline, because you can have a more enjoyable journey than you would do if you went for the cheaper ticket. So before you hand over your hard-earned cash to get the cheapest flight you found, you really should check about the airlines as well. And as well as TripAdvisor I've already mentioned, the one you should really look out for is airlinequality.com. Now this is run by Skytrax, and they carry out major passenger surveys. And this website is a mix of official surveys and public reviews. It isn't always easy to find your route, but if you use the find option on Internet Explorer or Google Chrome or whatever, and put in the airport code, then that will help you to find the route you're looking for. Because basically they're listed by airport codes, so you could have LON-NAS-LON, and that's how it's listed. And if you don't know what those mean, then you're not going to find the review. It doesn't do routes by routes, it's just listed sequentially. A bit like an old tape when you used to do a mixtape, if you can remember that far back, where you record one after the other. Well, this information on this website is just put up one after the other, and it does take a little bit of finding. So you need to check the airline codes for you're going to first. Use the find function on your Internet Explorer or Google Chrome, and you have to do this per page. So you only do the search on the first page, and you click on page 2, and you repeat the find function to find your routes. But other websites you can use are theflyerguide.net and www.airline-reviews.co.uk. And also the reviewcentre.com have plenty of reviews. They also do airlines as well, and you could check out reviewcentre.com/products251.html. And if you really want to scare yourself before you fly, then visit www.airsafe.com. And if you're not a nervous flyer, you probably will be after visiting that website. Or for a laugh, you could actually tell the rest of your party to have a look before you give them their tickets. One of the things that can be expensive when it comes to buying a ticket is finding out that your child is actually an adult as far as the airline is concerned. And when I was a travel agent, I used to have a lot of inquiries from parents who assumed that their 17-year-old would be classed as a child. But generally, the maximum age for a child is 12 years old on the date of their return. So if you go away for your kid's 13th birthday, they will unfortunately be charged as an adult for the ticket. An infant is classed as under the age of 2 years on the date of return, so you can go out for the first birthday, that's not a problem. They do not usually have their own seats though, unfortunately, but if you request a bulkhead seat, you will be given a skycot to use after takeoff. And if you don't arrange for a skycot, then the infant will have to be on somebody's lap for the whole journey. On a long haul flight, it might be worth actually paying for a child seat, to put your infant in, because it would just make life easier during meals. And you could see if you could use your car seat as some way of keeping your kid safe, your infant safe on the airline seat. Strap all that in. Check with the airline to see if you can do that. And generally, with a car seat, you should be able to carry that free of charge anyway. But unfortunately, an infant may not have any checked baggage allowance or in-flight meals, so you do need to be careful about what you're booking. And with the security checks, you might not be able to get your kids' food through security as well, so it does take a lot of planning, unfortunately. But you can check the latest security information from the airport you're travelling from about baby food, which includes milk and formula. A child under 16-year-old on the date of return on charter flights such as Thomson Fly and Thomas Cook can be a child. So if you're getting a charter flight, you may be able to get a child seat for a slightly older kid than you would do for something like Virgin or British Airways. And you may find that Ryanair and EasyJet have the same age group too, but it's something you need to be aware of. It's the age of the kid on the date of the return trip. Buggies and pushchairs can be used up to the point you get onto the aeroplane, but then they will have to be placed in the hold. The label should have been attached at check-in, but they are usually, but not always, in addition to your luggage allowance, so you should be able to take your suitcases and a buggy, but you do need to check the small print. Also, don't forget to check out the procedure for collecting them. Are they going to be waiting for you when you get off the plane at the other end, or do you have to go and hunt for them somewhere? And do your best to identify the trolley as well, the buggy, just in case the luggage label gets misplaced during the flight. Talking about what's going to be available, disabled flyers do need some assistance, well, sometimes need assistance, and if a passenger has some disabilities, they should be declared at the time of booking. Although it is believed that some people don't declare it because they're refused about getting the booking. But it's very important that you do let the airline know as soon as possible. Especially if you're somebody who needs oxygen, because there is a limit of how many passengers on a flight can carry oxygen. So you do need to make sure that there is a capability for the airline to carry you before you actually hand over your money. It can be difficult. Some airlines don't go yes or no until you pay for the ticket, but hopefully you can check with the special department for that, find out if there's space, find out if you can take your oxygen on board, and you should be okay. But the hard part is finding out which company is actually responsible for looking after the disabled flyer. The airport may assist you at the check-in desk, but then the airline takes over, for example. When you inform the airline, which is usually by a special number or their general call centre, always take a name as reference in case there's any problems. When I was a travel agent, I did arrange for special assistance and it never turned up, but I always had the backup to say, look, I spoke to this person at this time and this date, and they accept it's going to be okay. And you need that to get any compensation back from the airlines. You may be able to take power buggers on board, but they will be placed in the hold. But there are some requirements, such as the battery must be disconnected before the powered buggy is loaded. And wheelchairs are also placed in the hold, with passengers using an airport and airline one after check-in. There could be extra charges for the equipment you need, such as the oxygen, which I mentioned earlier, so you do need to check that too. But unfortunately, I found that some airlines are particularly unhelpful when somebody has specific requirements. So instead of carrying out general searches, consider just using a specialist tour operator who will have some clout and have the right names of the people at the airlines to talk to sort out the problem. It could save you a lot more grief. It could be worth spending the extra few quid to do that. Or you could check the online forums. There's forums for everything. Find out who the good guys and who the bad guys are when it comes to your specific requirement. And when we come back after the break, we're going to go through a few more important bits about how to book your flight ticket.
Gary Fitz here, every Monday, 10 o'clock.
Coming up, we've got Eric and Ernie.
Join me here on Seclo Sounds.
In your smile.
It's from 1975. Eric and Ernie were four.
Gary, it's not Eric and Ernie, it's Earl and Ernie, the Cape Brothers.
Union men?
Oh, I see.
Gary Fitz here, every Monday, 10 o'clock.
Earl and Ernie.
Checking it out before you check in on the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. Still to come, travel news, and there's a story about some passengers collapsed during a flight, but nobody knows why. And also a shocking story about airport security in the United States. I'm trying not to put you off flying, but maybe this week's show probably would. Who knows? But this week, I'd say it's part 2 of my introduction into booking flights, what you should look out for. There's more than just saying you want to go from A to B and saying here's my debit card details or credit card details. There's lots you can do to make sure you have the best possible experience for your journey, because it is an important part of your holiday. And there's no point in dreading the end of your holiday for the whole of the time you're away, because you know you're going to have a nightmare flight coming back. So I'm going to talk about a few more important points you should know. I did mention direct and non-stop last week, but just to remind you, a direct flight touches down between where you left and where you want to be, but you don't get off the airplane. And non-stop goes from A to B. They both go from A to B, but a direct has a touchdown. That's important for you to remember. And when you book your flights, are you happy with the flight times and connections? Connections can be very important. Have you allowed for the time to get through security, to recheck your baggage if you're taking a different airline ticket, so you're not buying one ticket, you're buying several tickets. You're going to need to check in again at the other end, so make sure you take that into account. Have you heard of the company listed from the price comparison website? I mentioned a few last week. Have you actually heard of the company? Do you think they actually exist? To be honest, not always, so do be careful. I mentioned rules last week. It's very important that you pay attention to the rules of the ticket. And your seat pitch and leg room. It may be worth flying with somebody else for the extra comfort given by the more space on board, which I mean is pay that little bit extra for the airline ticket because you're going to have a little bit more room. There's one airline, I went for the legroom seats by the exit, but I found out that my hips were too wide for the seats because they were the exit seats. The controls for the entertainment were down the side, so I had less space to fit my bum in. So you need to take that into account as too. So do check the details for that. Select your seat as soon as possible if you're able to do that on the website. Don't leave it until you check in. If it's possible to book the seat early, do it. However, if you're after an exit seat, you can't do that online. Well, some airlines you can now, but generally you can't, because you have to be physically capable of helping with any evacuation of the plane. So they need to assess you before they allocate the seat. In that instances, you do need to get to check-in as early as possible. If you're flying abroad, do check the entry requirements. Do you need a visa? Turkey, Egypt's all getting very confusing about visas right now. Make sure you're up to date and you know. If you don't have the right documentation, you won't get on the plane. Or if you do allow you on the plane, you might be coming back on the very next available flight. Have you looked at a package price? As I mentioned before, IT or ITX fares can be cheaper than buying a full fare or a flexible fare or whatever, as long as you follow the rules where you have to buy hire car or accommodation as well. And the same with charter seats. You may find if you buy yourself a nice cheap Thomas Cook charter holiday with accommodation, you can book accommodation separately where you really want to stay, and you can actually fly in and fly out using that accommodation but not actually stay there. Risky, but it is possible. E-tickets. What happens with your e-ticket? You get sent a number, and if you lose it, you're going to have any problems. Well, an e-ticket is a very handy detail for you to know, because you can add a little bit more to your itinerary. So you've got your flight booked and you know your departure and arrival airports, but which terminal do you need? If a travel agent's done it for you, they will tell you. If you booked online, you may have to hunt for that yourself. Scheduled flights can be looked up on third-party websites. In fact, some of the travel agents use these third-party websites to print your actual ticket. These websites are provided by the airline's global distribution providers, and which is also known as GDS. It's basically a computer system which is used to store and retrieve information and conduct flight booking transactions. If a travel agent has a full-blown GDS, they can do an awful lot more for you than you can do when you're online. So again, check with a travel agent before you book your flight. Get them to do the work for you. But to get to these third-party websites, all you need